Today's video is about breaking away from training barns. I'm really talking to you, the amateur equestrian who knows what they're doing. They have a vast, maybe decades of experience even, and it is time to maybe cut those codependencies a little bit, cut the strings, and actually trust yourself a little bit and do some self-growth within your equestrian sport. You're boarding horse, you're at a training facility, and you don't have your own place, therefore you're not the expert. Those things seem to go very hand in hand. You can't really step up as the expert a lot of times without your own property and your own kingdom to do things in, right? You're depending on the trainer that has the barn so you can keep your horse, and then all these other things happen. I have a lot to unpack in this video. This video is not for you if you're on the beginner end of the spectrum. Maybe you're somebody who went out there and just watched Yellowstone or something, you think or Heartland, and you think you know everything about horses and everything. This is not for you. Hunter jumper world is where I spent all of my time, at a barn that was owned by the trainer and was a serious training program where you're taking, weekly lessons and you're going to shows with that particular training. So that's where my experience on this comes from. My most recent 5 years, I moved over to dressage, which was actually part of my story about breaking away from training barns. It led me to dressage, to be quite honest. I've been around in the horse industry for 40 freaking years. Went to a lot of training barns over my 40 years. Those were generally the places that had good facilities that I would keep my horse at, and I'd be able to do some showing and all that kind of stuff. I have a lot of experience boarding my horse, working with a lot of different trainers, both in hunter jumper and dressage, made me who I am today. So I am very thankful for that. I want to reach out to people out there who are really ready to break away and break that codependent feeling. You've outgrown being told what to do, when to do it, when to ride, every last detail of your ride in these lessons. Oh my God. And it's really a disabling thing. When you've learned all of not only the basics, but a lot of advanced methodology, if you will, in riding, horse psychology, horse anxiety, you've started to realize that there's something more on the other side of this, and you're not growing that much anymore from your riding lessons or going to these shows. You're kept in this box, and I felt that. I felt it nagging at me. Yet I had this real dependent feel on trainers. I didn't ever think I could strike out and handle myself on my own or my horses. I always wanted that fallback to have a trainer to be able to get on the horse, all those fallback plans. And it's funny how when you finally break out of that, how much you can grow. Oh my gosh. In my last 5 years in horses, I've grown more than the prior 30 years. And that is no joke. And you know how I did it was I stopped riding at a training barn. I stopped boarding my horse at a training barn. I started relying on myself. I started relying on my own intuition, my own feelings, my own observations of the horse, my own connection with my horse. And what I found was a lot of fallacy in all of the things that I had been taught, like the culture around, especially hunter jumper stuff. I assume it's probably prevalent in dressage too, but definitely hunter jumper. I found that there was just so much more to learn about horsemanship. I believe that a lot of trainers keep their clients codependent. I think a lot of them don't really deep down want to see them grow their wings and be able to do things on their own. Number one, they want them dependent on lessons. They want them dependent on training rides. They want them dependent at the shows, and if you can keep that all under wraps, you're going to make more in your business. And the other part of that really is a control factor. I believe a lot of these trainers and barn owners are kind of control freaks, and they really don't want you seeing through the matrix, really. They don't want you, once you're educated, to kind of go out there and question what's going on, or maybe step in and take control on your own. That just is going to make things very difficult for a trainer. I get it for a lot of good reasons. You know, you don't want idiots out there doing crazy things at shows and doing crazy things at your barn. And I'm not for that. That's not what this video is about. This video is about the educated amateur equestrian that truly has that talent and that education in there to be able to strike out on their own. I'm going to talk about some problems in training barns and what I experienced, which I bet you is a lot of the same experiences you've had. So first, let's talk about being forced to ride. You know, the whole culture of get on your horse, you know, it's going crazy, it's windy as hell, or there's snow falling off the roof, you know, that day in your indoor arena, and you're expected to just get on and deal with it. And if you fall off, well, you know, suck it up, suck it up. It's not a big deal. I'm here to tell you that that is the worst thing you could ever do. And that was part of my learning when I broke away from training barns. So Tick Maynard is somebody that I really learned from. I took his masterclass on horse anxiety. I also had a lesson with him over the phone, actually, to ask him a lot of questions because I really liked his methodology. But when I struck out on my own, one of the first issues I had was, oh crap, you know, I'm not the bravest rider in the world, and I would encounter, you know, spook, and a lot of times that would be a little predictable. It could be on those windy days. It could be, you know, again, the snow falling off the roof or something. But I'm here to tell you that it is your responsibility to read the horse. Get the lay of the land with your horse. Read that body language and actually decide if you swing a leg over or not. Yep, I said it. You don't always have to ride. Sometimes the smartest decision and the biggest step forward in a day is to actually not ride. If you're coming out and you look at your horse, you know, and you see they have this stare. They just have this stare and they're looking at that spooky corner or something like that. You're walking them out and it's just like, and they stop and they're very still, or their ears are pricked looking in a certain direction. They look tense. They don't have their poll low, you know, their poll's way up here and they're just, you know, heads up, don't get on the horse, girl. Like, that's okay. Your smart move on that day is to observe and make your own choice. So I'm not going to go into a whole spiel here on, you know, horse anxiety and psychology and reading the horse, but that sets the tone here. The issue is that you need to know these things and be enabled to act upon them. And I found at training barns that I was not able to act on those things. I was always told, get on, deal with it, all this stuff. But the problem, you know, that keeps you codependent is you do get on in those circumstances and you do need all the help because you're riding this horse in complete an anxiety state. The horse is in anxiety. The horse isn't going to learn when they're in a state of anxiety. You're not going to be able to, you know, do anything or move forward on that particular moment. Okay. So why would you get on and put yourself in danger and then not teach your horse anything? Okay. Because we train every day we ride, right? So those are some things that I felt I couldn't control at a training barn. And I was expected to, okay, you have a lesson at 6 o'clock, you know, this all's going on, you know, you're getting on anyways, and it's going to be a terrible experience. And then maybe the trainer has to get on, all these kind of things. And I'm here to tell you, after years of just being on my own, I was able to correct all of that without any issue. It was no longer, oh my God, my horse is going to spook and I'm going to fall off. Nope. You can actually choose what to do. And, you know, when you're away from that trainer, that's your choice. So that's learning point number one. Let's talk about pain in training. So another thing that you need to be in charge of and not codependent on a trainer for is if you notice, like you're going to know your horse better than anyone, or you should, okay? You shouldn't be getting on and riding if you think something's up with your horse. So let's say you get on and you feel something is just not quite right. Maybe there's no overt lameness. The first thing you do is you're like, hey, can you watch him trot a little bit? Is it just me here, or is this kind of funky? And, you know, the trainer goes, oh no, they're fine, you know, because they want your money for the lesson, okay? So you know your horse is feeling super weird, lazy, won't move off the leg. All of a sudden you're just getting a bracy feel. It's nothing maybe somebody would see from the ground, but you know it. Well, when you're at a training barn, no one cares. you're expected to lesson and do that show or whatever you're doing anyways, because there's no overt lameness yet, right? So what happens is, in these circumstances, your horse can potentially get run into the ground. When you feel something like that, the very smart thing to do is say, I'm going to save my horse for another day. I'm going to observe this tomorrow. I'm going to see how this horse is over the next couple days or week. Did it totally go away, never come back? Or are you seeing that little thing come back? And if you see that, you need to be in the driver's seat to be able to be empowered to say, no, I'm not riding this horse. I'm going to check this out. I'm going to give him rest, whatever your choice might be. But I'm telling you, having to show up for a lesson and ride anyways and ride your horse into the ground is going to make that brewing suspensory injury worse. It's going to, whatever's going on, it's kissing spine, or there's, arthritis somewhere in the neck, or, whatever. The only thing that's going to happen from that is you losing confidence and your horse going lame and making a problem worse. So you should always be in the driver's seat to make a decision on if you ride any certain day. And I'm telling you, a training barn that requires you to take 1 or 2 lessons a week and hit those shows, certain number of shows a year, that's not where you're going to be enabled to make that choice. And it sucks. And I don't recommend it. Another thing that I found was I always had these gut instincts. Oh my gosh, when I look back, I'm like, oh, hello. I had these gut instincts of when to get on and when not to get on, when things weren't right. I remember one horse I had that, he was just really hard to canter. Why was I having a problem cantering my horse? And then, the trainer kept treating it as a training problem. And I'm like, this shouldn't be an issue. Well, when I broke away from that situation, which was my total breakaway from training barns from that point, I had the horse looked at by a vet. And do you know he had some major arthritis that was brewing? There was some stifle arthritis, hock arthritis. Later on, I found that he had neck arthritis. And it completely explained why I was having such a hard time cantering this horse and why he was so hard to bend to the right, actually. Long story short, I had to get away from a training barn to get the vet out to really investigate what was going on, because I knew it wasn't me. And I knew it wasn't him just being an asshole, because generally horses don't just say, I'm going to be an asshole. They're usually very smart. They're usually very responsive, and they really want to do what they're being asked to do. And if you're having, your horses is a certain baseline of training and they suddenly start to revert and they start to get worse and they're harder to ride and things like that, that is a surefire non-training issue. That is a surefire medical issue, and you've got to get it checked out. It's always out of my sheer politeness and subservient, almost like nature to fit in this training environment. It was, I would always go with what the trainer would say. I would never get in an argument or just put my foot down and say, I'm not doing this, because it just stepped completely outside of the culture of the barn. And if you know, okay? A barn is like a cult, and the trainer is like a godlike emperor, right? And whatever they say goes. So by gosh, don't try to be smarter or like advocate for your horse or anything, because, you're going to be blackballed. I kept myself codependent almost out of politeness. I know it sounds weird, but instead of having the ability to explore those things that I was, had gut instincts on, I always have to do what the trainer would say or expect, or what I felt the culture expected. And so I would keep running into some brick walls, right? And they were manufactured brick walls. It was just me trying to fit into the culture and do what the trainer said so that, I would get along. We see a lot of other things happen like this, where you see things in the news about, people going to clinics and a clinician like beating their horse and like yelling at them and doing all this weird stuff. And I'm telling you, it's all rooted in that culture. So being in a training barn, you've got to realize you kind of give up the wheel. You give up the steering wheel. And I don't think it's a good thing. I think once you have, that advanced intermediate or advanced skill set, it's time to start doing a little bit of learning, continue learning on your own and strike out on your own if you can. So let's talk about what breaking away from the training environment looks like. This is only good for you if you're an inquisitive person, you're a lifelong learner, you're somebody who's going to really dig in, read riding theory, you're going to figure out your own problems, you're going to watch a lot of YouTube, to be honest. People post all sorts of great material on YouTube. Amelia Newcomb is one of them. They do a lot of tutorials, a lot of riding analysis. And if you're a continual learner and you thirst for figuring out your problems, you are somebody who can break away from the training environment. Also, let's talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect and the Rumsfeld matrix. So the Dunning-Kruger effect is, again, this is the group I'm trying to target, not target here. People who are usually new to subject matter, things like that, they're going to rate themselves highly on their knowledge on a certain aspect. Let's say somebody who's doing, high school math and they take a test and they're not very good at it. A lot of those people are going to rate themselves, hey, I probably did well on that test, because they don't know what they don't know. Okay. So if you're a new rider, you may think you know a lot about the horse industry, about training, about horse psychology, and you don't. Okay. It takes a lifetime of learning. And I still learn all the time. Like I said, when I broke out on my own and got away from these weekly lessons and all this kind of stuff, I ended up growing so much more. Not because I was just riding by myself and being an idiot and just continuing on with what I'd learned before. It was because I was faced with issues on a weekly basis and I had to figure them out. No one was going to take care of me but me. So I was a lifelong learner, always, looking at clinics online, videos online, reading riding theory, all sorts of things. But I was able to identify my problem, think through it, get the right help, targeted help, and keep moving on. Okay. So Dunning-Kruger, you have to be aware of what you don't know. You have to always realize that there are things that you don't know, you got to figure them out. And there's other things that you don't even know exist. Another big point of learning and breaking away from training barns, especially in the hunter jumper world, is freaking groundwork. Oh my God. This was something that I spent 35 years in hunter jumper land, and we never did freaking groundwork. We just stick our horse on the lunge line, if it was hyper or something, and, run some of the energy out. Oh my God, it was a hot mess. Okay, so all hunter jumper trainers should be teaching groundwork concepts to their students. Oh my God, this is how you get through. You've got a spooky horse, you've got stuff that's going wrong, you need to bring down the anxiety level, you need to expose your horse to something, whatever it is, so you're not getting thrown off in the saddle. It's groundwork. Groundwork is a huge part of that answer. And that was something I found when I broke away on my own. And I couldn't believe my knowledge gaps on that. So I spent a lot of time just with groundwork to get a horse that was very respectful of me. That all transfers into the saddle. All of it. Okay. The leadership aspect, they're looking to you for leadership. All of that. So that's a whole nother video in itself. But I do recommend that if you're breaking away from all this, that's one of your areas you may need to learn about if you came from the sport horse world, is groundwork. It's not just some Western bullshit. It's for real. It's legit. So connect with your horse and you're going to be in a way better spot, girl. Sorry, I'm eating chocolate now. Never pick a battle that you can't win. This also tags into deciding when you're going to ride and when you're not going to ride, okay? If it's a battle that you can win, you're feeling confident when you swing a leg over, you're going to work that issue to the end, okay? Never pick a battle you can't win. If it's something where, again, it's a flighty day, your horse seems like they're way up in the rafters, their brain is on the moon, you may not feel that you can win a battle if you swing a leg over. Okay, so what you're going to do is pick the battle you can win, okay? Because this does matter for leadership. This isn't about being bossy or, getting all up in your horse's face, okay? Not at all. This is about providing your horse leadership and comfort, but most importantly, leadership, okay? So you're going to pick the battle you can win, which on a given day, that might be groundwork. It might be taking your horse where their brain is in the rafters and bringing it back to level 3. Okay? Maybe you don't get all the way down to 1, but you bring it all the way from 10 down to 3. And this horse is now focusing on you. You know, they're listening to what you're asking for. And that's a win for that day. Okay? That was a battle you could win. And you call that quits, and that's a good day. And you're going to come back out another day where you're going to get on your horse, and it's going to be good because you didn't take 5 steps back the other day. You took 1 step forward, okay? Riding is all about incremental improvement. We're talking about 1% movements, 1% progress towards your goals each day, hopefully. And if you're doing that, you are winning, okay? What we want to make sure every day is that we don't take 3 steps back just because you're trying to take 1 step forward. You know, don't lose your ground over picking a battle that you can't win. This doesn't mean that you hide in a corner and you never get on your horse, okay? This doesn't mean there's not hard work at all. It just means making a smart assessment. It's kind of like if you're driving down the road and you're trying to get to work and you see a tornado on the horizon. Are you going to keep driving to the tornado? No, you're going to turn back and go home because missing work is saving yourself for another day, right? Driving into the tornado to try to get to work is a stupid idea because you might lose everything. It's the same thing with riding choices. Manners. So if you came from the hunter-jumper world especially, maybe dressage too, I feel like we totally blow past the manners. A horse should be respectful. They should be looking to you as a leader. They should be looking to you for guidance. And you should be there as the protector, the safe person, right? The safety net. That's what you are. You're firm, but you're safe. You're trustable, okay? If you have that relationship with your horse on a daily basis, and I'm talking about just walking them out to pasture, bringing them in from pasture, handling them in their stall, handling them in the cross ties. If you have that relationship with your horse where they respect you, they listen to what you're saying, you're telling them to knock it off and they knock it off, and you know, you're able to move them around, move their feet around, you're able to do groundwork where you can get them to, you know, do a little leg yield on the ground. You're able to, you know, just tap your whip on the ground a little bit and they back up. Okay. Pretty soon they learn your body language and you go like this and they back up for you. They're very responsive animals. Okay. If you have that is going to transfer to your riding every single time. And in the horse sport world, I mean, gosh, you watch people and they're just walking their horses around. They're walking all over them. You know, it is just a hot mess. And looking back on that, I just can't believe it. I just can't believe that was not part of all of this training. I mean, it totally keeps everybody back. And it's funny to look back on now. I do this stuff all the time. Another part about breaking away on your own is getting a truck and a trailer. Best move of my freaking life. It opened up all the doors because before I depended on a trainer to get me to shows, okay? I lived in the suburb, didn't have any of that stuff, boarded my horse, and it's like I was totally dependent on the trainer to get me to shows. Not that I necessarily needed, you know, the schooling or any of this and that, which at that time I kind of thought I did, but then I found out, nope, didn't really. Oh my gosh, all of a sudden the whole world's open to you. You don't have to depend on anyone to get you to shows. And if you are a good enough rider and that was the only thing hanging over your head, oh my gosh, it's like, it's a whole nother world. And then for me, that opened up my learning even more. Do you know that I had never hooked up a trailer before? It was all new to me. It intimidated the hell out of me. That's a whole nother video in itself, but it's not that hard. Once you learn how and everything, you know, where I bought my trailer, they had to kind of show me how to do everything. And I watched some tutorials on YouTube, again, thirsting for learning. It wasn't a big deal at all. And I actually love it. I actually love hooking up the trailer and, you know, going places and stuff. Another thing that connects to that about striking out on your own is making sure that you know how to actually load and unload a horse from the trailer. A lot of times a horse can be a great loader and then all of a sudden they're not, okay? You've got to be prepared for that. That's also a whole nother video. I really hope that I found some people that can relate to this, and I hope that I'm giving somebody out there some confidence that, I'm somebody who struck out on my own, and I'm so much better for it. I mean, just such a better horse person. It's not even funny. Finally, I was able to get to the shows I wanted to get to. I was able to go all the way to USDF finals totally on my own. No trainer at the show, my own truck and trailer. I had all of those tools. I had them all. I just wasn't on my own where I could exercise my own better judgment and make those choices, all of the stuff. And it's just the most wonderful thing I've ever experienced. If you're somebody who feels like really under the thumb of a trainer, and you're having this voice nagging at you that says, should have done this or should have done that, or this isn't going well, or I feel this is coming from my horse, I'm getting these messages, you know what? Listen to it. Listen to it. The only person who cares about you is you in this business, okay? So don't let somebody who wants your lesson money and wants your show money and all this stuff, don't let them, number one, compromise your horse or compromise you and what you know. Once you've gotten to the point where you've been under the tutelage of multiple different trainers, you've really amassed a lot of knowledge and riding theory and all that, and you're a good rider, you're a competent rider at what you're doing. Maybe you're a hunter jumper rider, and you've done plenty of 2-6 and some 3-foot, and you've done the juniors, you've done some adult stuff, things like that. You're a dressage rider and you've been able to move up the levels, you've trained, some young horses, things like that. It's time to start thinking about, like, are you enabled to use your own brain, your own judgment, or are you being held back by being under someone's thumb at a training barn just because you're trying to get along, and you don't have confidence in yourself? I'm telling you, when you kind of break away from it and you have to swim on your own, you figure out how to swim and you will start winning races, and it is so much freaking better. So I'm telling you, equestrians, think about it. If you fit into what I'm talking about, maybe start to look for some opportunities. Is there a place you can break away and go and, be your own trainer, and go to clinics, still engage, still go to clinics, learn from people, go to shows, watch people. What are they doing? Watch YouTube, trailer in to have a lesson, but maybe don't be at a barn where you're subservient and where you have to take a lesson every week, no matter how you feel, and you've got to go to these shows just because the barn requires it. Let's get out of that mindset and get into something much better. So if this message connected with you, please share it with a friend. If you know somebody who needs that confidence or can connect with this information, that's what I'm here for. And also make sure to subscribe and like as well, which will help the algorithm.